Afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. It's a pleasure for me to inaugurate this audience for the Rights of Nature Tribunal about the update about the Vaca Muerta case. I would like to start commenting that the International Rights of Nature Tribunal is an institution that was created by citizens to give rights of nature a platform. The tribunal creates a forum so that people all over the world can speak on behalf of nature to protest on the Earth's destruction because of government involvement and of companies' involvement and with the government's approval. It does judicial recommendations about Earth restoration as a model for baseline communities. It also focuses on local impacts of who are the guardians of the earth. This is a space to share alternatives about the earth, water, and the earth community. The tribunal has already held 5 events about the international rights of nature, 2 regionals, 2 local audiences, 3 in situ visits, and it's getting ready for 2 international audiences in New York about fossil fuels in Canada because of the mining issue, 2 presented in a tribunal in Brazil in COP30. It is also preparing some visits in situ, as is the delivery of this verdict in November of this year, and also a visit in person to the territory of Serbia. The verdicts applied to the highest level can provide a tool for for seeking global justice. It's inspired in the Permanent Tribunal of the Peoples and the Human Rights Tribunal to claim against the state, and also asks nations to assume the work that civil society is doing and defends nature's fundamental rights. The tribunal has eyes in the Balkans, Brazil, Canada, States, Argentina, Australia, Mexico, and others against British Petroleum, Newman Mining Corporation, and others. This tribunal and the audience that we will have today is based and gives a follow-up to the visit of the judges who went from 29th of March and 5th of April, visited the area of Neuquén and Vaca Muerta in the provinces of Rio Negro and Vaca Muerta, and it was focused on environmental impacts and human rights are impacted by extractive industry in this region. To be able to know what the state is of the situation of Vaca Muerta, we are now in this virtual meeting, and I will give the word to Francesco Martone so he can continue with this hearing. Thank you so much. And this is Natalia Greene, the Secretary for the Rights of Nature Tribunal. Natalia Greene. Thank you, Nati. Good afternoon. Good evening. I am Francesco Martone. I am the judge of the tribunal, and I coordinate the Assembly of Judges for the Rights of Nature. It's made up of different distinguished personalities of the whole continents. It represents global justice that unites the global North and South. This hearing, as Nati said, seeing a vision of a field visit that was held on March 2023. And along this whole year, the tribunal has noted certain happenings with the current government of Argentina, development of infrastructure, criminalization of ecological movements, indigenous people for the defense of the territory, that had us call this hearing so that we can update the information, the analysis that we have developed, and also seeing the new events that have happened. Our final objective also, as Nati said, is to be able to deliver a verdict by November, and that is a tool that will help with incidence tools, and that the challenges that are being faced are being considered in Vaca Muerta and all it implies for nature, the territories, and people. We are here to visibilize, to hear, listen, express our solidarity and our worry about denouncing this extractivist model and its impact, the monoculture of fossil fuels that with the governments of yesterday and today in Argentina point this out for the development of the country. The current government is looking to consolidate the export profile of the country and pursues this strategy with the nefarious structure of the capitalist architecture in favor of private companies, securitizing the areas. The Ministry of National Security instituted a specific unit to militarize infrastructures and also to reprimand any sort of protest in order to be able to have the right to defend nature and people itself. Other institutes are being closed up, like the Family Institute of Agriculture, and also it pretends to have a free market and pursuing policies that invisibilize the Mapuche market and also the resolution of Mendoza that attempt against their territories. So now the Mapuche peoples are in two threats, in the middle of two threats, in terms of the extractivist frontier and that which is represented by the ecological debt and the pollution caused by this same reason. And the extraction volume of Vaca Muerta is very high and it goes against the emissions, the tendency to reduce emissions, and also the buildup of the pipeline and the national parks and other places. In this context, construction of alliances and the support of initiatives and movements of the peoples and the strengthening of other alternatives that help consider just intercultural transitions. That's why we are here. I don't want to steal more of your time. Without further ado, we can start with the first part of this hearing that will try to update the case of Vaca Muerta and the list of the delegation of the tribunal. We have three presenters, Mapuche Confederation of Mapuche, Assembly for Human Rights of Neuquén, and Fernando Cabrera, who's part of the observatory. And I want to thank everyone to be able to nurture this hearing that for the tribunal is so important into the preparation of the visit that we will have in November. Thank you very much. Are you ready to start? Let's fare una well. Thank you, Francesco. I greet you to all the judges of the tribunal. It's a pleasure to be here in contact with all of you and also being accompanied by other colleagues, such as the La PH Obsur in our case. And we are again in communication so that we can update the information of what is going on in the Mapuche territory. And neo-colonialist extractivism has baptized it with another name or area. And I wanted to let you know that the authorities of the different Mapuche communities and the Mapuche Confederation, women and men who are moving forward with our territorial organization. And in our part, thinking that since your visit until now we live at the moment is a worsening of the situation in general, not only for the Mapuche peoples, but also the rest of the population, the pressure in the territorial aspect because of the constant expansion of the hydrocarbon frontier in all the territories that does not distinguish between protected areas and other areas that are sensitive. And with the new government of the country, and because of all the denial of any climatic impact, the country has accepted the situation of this sacrificial area of Vaca Muerta for petroleum and gas extraction, with new works for infrastructure that have been planned out for the territories in the pipeline of Vaca Muerta Jur and other pipelines and gas lines that are at the moment are in a halt because of the action of the communities in the Neuquén province. And this speaks about the unfulfillment of the agreement of Escazú and the unfulfillment of the current legislation in terms of indigenous peoples, and also the suspension of the law 26/160 that the territorial order has been written and it has been stopped in the fundamental communities like Fortinepiera, Campo Maripén, Primo Guardia, where these oil areas are key and they have the names of forts because here's where the conquest of the desert in which the Argentinian military invaded Mapuche territory. And this is a new campaign in the desert where this is a euphemism because really it's a valley, sorry, between the rivers Neuquén and Rimay, which are now being destroyed in order for oil companies to win. And also the corporative capture that is crystallized when Big Petrol, which is one of the main companies in the region, has assumed the direction of YPF and the Secretariat of Energy and Labor that are putting forth a reform that s- tramples on the rights of the population and labor rights. And worse yet, a prize that is not deserved. And they were focusing on Fortín de Piedra, which is a main area in oil, which is where there is a situation where the consequences are not being recognized of the small quakes that have been happening, which have reached 500, and there are two new quakes. And this is also aggravated because of the assumption of people who have fulfilled a horrible role, who uh, assumes as this her place as Minister of Security, and now they have a new productive security unit where the area of conflict and the energetic area are key for this, and they also declare the free availability of governments, especially the federal government and federal forces that want to place a fort of the armed forces. There's a militarization in the conflict area with the Mapuche peoples and the different communities that are supporting this treatment constantly. Companies have also assumed in a full-fledged way without regard with the local population, the Mapuche population and the general population to state a decarbonization that responds to the need of oil companies. And this we can see with the Vaca Muerta net zero plan, where there are companies that will receive new incentives, not subsidies, and they will not regard the population of the territories to really think about an energetic transition that is productive and that thinks about and establishes a real decarbonization. This constitute a new face wash for the industry, for the people in the generation of cryptocurrencies in areas where they don't have gas, but the local population doesn't even have power. That's the situation of our communities. And until today, we have been with 3 of the 15 communities, and they don't have running water, and they don't even have electricity. This lies racism that is not only environmental, but how water and energy benefits companies. And this situation is heightened with the new regulation of the new regime of incentives for big investments that deepen the line that is between them and the Mapuche population. And this is evidenced this year in the detention of Lalong Antonio Molina y Karen Sanchez. They are not allowing the integration of a water duct for fracking while the population doesn't have running water. So this is water for the company of Equinor, which is a Norwegian company that is also part of the violations that exist in the area. And the amplification, and as an update of your visit in the seismic area in the northern part of the province, where you were also there whenever you came for your visit. And right now the quakes that exist in Mapuche territory in the northern area, in places like this that have been invaded in a way by Chevron. And I only have 1 minute left. From the legislation, there's an unfulfillment of regard for indigenous rights, and also the rulings that even though there are 10 years where the Supreme Court of Justice in Argentina of the creation of the official registry for indigenous communities, and that they also have legal personhood recognized, and the creation of a whole campaign of greenwashing for Vaca Muerta whenever we're speaking about net zero decarbonization. And it's led by the oil companies, the heightened carbon capture and the increase of the seismic areas, and also the great works in infrastructure that will generate more pressure in the territories, more exploitation, more pollution. So from now, thank you so much for this space. And I will still be here to listen to my colleagues and whomever has a word. Thank you so much. Faru, just to remind you that this tribunal voiced their opinions of the 2 leaders that were detained. And I think your words are a clear example of how this supposed energetic transition is in the denial of human rights, free determination to territory, and the violation of the ancestral mission and the relationship between human and nature. This is a classic example where we can see there's an ontological conflict and different visions of the world. So thank you so much. And also to point out that with the tribunal, we will be focusing very much in the defenders of the territory. And we are going to imagine some measures and tools to prevent and protect hostility cases, threats, and criminalization. I want to give the word to Walter Perez and Bruno Valara, who is part of the Human Rights Assembly in Neuquén. Go ahead and thank you so much for being here with us today. Hello, judges, colleagues. I am going to be very brief because I understand that what the most interesting part will be the explanation that Bruno Varana, our lawyer, will give us, because our role as a PDH that we defined a couple years ago through one of our founders, Emilia Bruni, who left a year ago from the organization, allowed us to enter because of an agreement that we subscribed with the environmental lawyers as the cause of the Comarsa oil dump that is already close to the city center of Neuquén, and it's still expanding. The city is still expanding, and it's a judicial criminal project. And what are we pursuing? We want environmental impunity to stop. And we have a lot of expectations in this criminal process with the owners of the company. And we also have the aspiration that this responsibility is extended to the officials of the provincial government, and having the accumulation of oil dump in the city of Neuquén. We have been able recently to have something in favor of us that sets a precedent with the Superior Criminal Court that intervened in the process that came after hearing, and that ended in the Superior Tribunal with a favorable opinion about our stance. So I'm gonna give the floor to Bruno so he can share some elements about this consequence, this court ruling. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me all right. My name, as Walter presented me, is Bruno Badala. I am the lawyer for the Assembly of Human Rights of Neuquén. And in this context, and before going into my point, I'm going to set my timer so I can respect the time that I was requested to speak. But just to give you a bit of context, the national government right now, current government, is that there is a history of whomever is responsible for the crimes against humanity. And this is a government that is in denial, and it gives various examples of this. And they take people in prison in order to elaborate some normative that will permit them to leave jail. And also, I wanted to let you know who we are and who's speaking to you. And as Walter was telling us, since a while ago, we started to get involved in legal and environmental issues. And in this context, there's an oil dump or a company that tries to, like a treatment plant for oil called Comarsa, and it was placed like a couple of steps from the center of the city of Neuquén, which was a product of the way the city grew, and the company had never fulfilled with what they should have done, which is to move this treatment plant where they don't cause hazardous situations for the population. In 2014, the neighbors started complaining. I think that many of you know where this company is located in Neuquén. And in 2020, there was a cause that was started that us as the Assembly for the Rights of Human Rights and the relationship that exists between human rights and environment. is that we also accused the responsible people of this maneuver of what is going on in this company. And in February this year, there was a series of hearing. I'm gonna sum this up so that I don't take so much time doing this. But this happened in the criminal forum. There was a series of hearings in Neuquén in which we had litigations about 2 points, accusing the director of a company and also precautionary measures that it impacted the company and also physical people. In order to sum this up, there's a company that is a product of fracking. There's the extraction of mud and these contaminating elements. Take them to a company that have a millionaire um, contract to treat them and also dispose of them later. If companies don't this, there's a literal dump and they have to distribute their dividends. So that's what they're doing right now. That's their maneuver. So we're accusing the directors of the company in February, and there's a series of hearings, more than 8, until we reached the Supreme Tribunal Criminal Court because of the precautionary measures. So why do I think this is important and why I want to highlight what Walter said? And why is this important? You know, in Argentina, every jurisdiction in Argentina is the say in their natural resources. And every province has internally a pyramid in the judicial aspect. And right now in that pyramid, there is a criminal court. So the decisions are very important, at least for that sphere of litigation, of how this impacts other actors within the system. This situation of Comarsa is preceded for me because of 2 very important situations, which is the claim of the neighbors because they were mobilizing themselves because of the mountain of garbage that there was, and also the way of acting of the different government officials. So in Neuquén, they were given free land so that the company could do whatever they wanted. And this was very scandalous because they gave land to other companies, and right now there's a new oil dump, and the company maintains both at the same time. So we found out about this first place that was near the city center of Neuquén. And what happened? In the precautionary measures that were asked for, there was an embargo for $7 million. These $7 million are made up of insurance, and then it has different scopes. So there's a product of the contracts they obtained, the dividends they distributed, but there's $7 million around, mainly with contracts with the company YPF, which is a state-owned company, or it's a majority it's state-owned. And right now, the product of this cause is that we were able to determine, and it's not an exact number because we can't get exact figures, but it's 110,000 cubic meters of the dump that is near the city center of Neuquén. In January, there was strong rainfall, and the contaminated material exceeded the limits of the company. The next month, they will give more land for the population of Neuquén. So that's what is happening in the premises at the moment. So what I wanted to focus on is that product of our litigation and to be able to take the case to the justice tribunal, we were able to have them revoke the decision that some judges took of living without effect the precautionary measures that were asked for. So we went to the tribunal, and the tribunal called a hearing. This doesn't usually happen, and they don't usually open space for hearings. And went to a hearing with a colleague who is not here with us today, and we invoked our stance and with a fundament of local environment, and we want for them to see this, and we want the Tribunal of Justice to say that we were right, and then they ordered the public ministry to be faster for the investigations related to this case. And what I think is most interesting is that they said that in the province of Neuquén, we had to have a functional, positive interpretation that is also practical of the right in the Constitution. And they said concretely that from the reform of 94, we have a new judicial culture that is favoring the environment, and that it's unequivocally operative. But I think this has the court ruling has a meaning, because anytime that there's anything to deal with oil dumps, because this will be the antecedent to invoke this, so that the judges, so that the judicial operators have this in mind whenever they have to make decisions. And it was a product of the litigation of this case since the beginning of the claim until these instances, because as I am telling you this today, and Monday we have a new hearing regarding this same subject, even though it's not the same decision, but it's about this subject, and this is a constant discussion. Without prejudice of this, I think it's important to highlight this information, and I'm gonna speak about more of what Lev said. So Niken has a reality today that there's so many quakes that before didn't exist. There's more than 500 quakes that have been registered. Further than this reality that is very harsh, I think there was a discussion that we had with the Tribunal Court of Justice that other litigations could support the struggle against this way of acting, especially from some companies that act and remain with impunity. That's the idea. I'm 10 minutes 27 seconds. So I'm gonna wait to see if you have any questions. The idea was to update the state of the cause against this dump oil dumping company. That's what we're doing right now. We won this small battle. The cause is not over yet, but we hope that we have a judgment in February, hopefully sooner. And that's what is going on at the moment. Thank you so much for listening, and I am available for anything, any request, question. Thank you so much, Bruno. With your presentation, you're offering an argument of being able to delve deeper, that we have to delve deeper, and how this final verdict of the tribunal can serve as a tool for strategic litigation, to go to tribunals, to strengthen arguments that you're going to take to the tribunals. Because right now we're in a situation in which the state is an accomplice, and the companies can have an objective of incidents at a local and a national level. For example, the defendants of rights of human rights, and this has to be anchored in the territorial discussions, the struggle to protect the territory. So I think we are drafting our first presentations and an idea of how we can give a follow-up together to the verdict and the mission that we will have in Argentina. I'm going to give the word to Fer Cabrera. And with that, we close the first section. Then we have the second part. And also, we're going to dedicate a few minutes to the judges so that they can ask their questions or any comment they might want to share. Thank you so much, Bruno and Walter. And now I am giving the floor to Fernando Cabrera. Thank you, Francesco. Good afternoon, everyone. Here in front of the tribunal, trying to contribute with news since more than a year ago that you came to the mission with great changes. And I want to highlight or underline the two sectors that expose the difficulties, the challenges, the tensions with the Mapuche peoples and also the quakes, greenwashing, and the situation of this oil dumping cause. This is the most important judicial cause that we have at the moment. And it's just a little step in terms of what is going on in the environmental destruction of the industry. But for us, it's a flag, and we are doing whatever we can in order for this to have a favorable outcome. I have 3 points that I want to expose. And what situation is the national government? A second point that is more focused on what's the hydrocarbon perspective, and the other point in the repressive situation that is going on, that is being conformed, that has had some advancements. Not not right now at the environmental sector, but we are not free from this. And also the criminalization of protests. To describe the general situation in a succinct manner, I think that we're in a context that we can characterize in 5 points. There's a economic and social frailty. There's poverty, hunger with an economy that cannot launch with the governmental expectations, and there's inflation that has been growing. And as a second point, there's a certain political stability that wasn't so clear until a couple months ago, but because there's a sanction of Alevase, which is a general reform in terms of economic and political situations and with governors. And there was a signature of a pact in May, and this gives a political platform or stabilization. And there's a certain governmental capacity or political capacity that is tainted by repressive moves and criminalization. There's a fourth point that has to do with the national government as well the Patagonian provinces. We're only speaking about Neuquén, Reneiro, and also the press and the sectors that are centered in political powers, and they are favoring different hydrocarbon projects. And the fifth point that I also want to mention is that in these 8 months, there is a persistent resistance that is sustained, continuous, with great mobilizations. Some of them are very big, but it hasn't been able to be enough, or it hasn't been sufficiently persistent and obvious in order to be able to generate another direction of what the government is doing. But certainly there is a resistance that seems to be weak in terms of the government. So these 5 points to characterize the moment is important in terms of energy policies and great investments, the reform, the energetic reform, the law, the Bases law. There's a liberalization of the energetic sector in order to regulate prices and exportations for the future, saying that our exporting from Argentina will be free. And as a second point, it establishes a rigide but gives a lot of benefits and advantages to millionaire investments that are bigger than $1,000 million that will benefit them in terms of taxes, of access to different currencies for 30 years. So there's a base law that has a priority for the access of different entrepreneurships other than ones that are considered in terms of water energy. So there are companies that are also subscribed to this. And on the other hand, in terms there's mega works, great investment projects, huge entrepreneurships as an alternative for the problems of the government with a lot of legitimacy coming through there. So there's going to be jobs and dollars coming in. There are already other pipelines and gas lines, and also exporting ports and the great works that is being planned out that I'm sure our colleagues will be talking about later. But this will imply a multiplication of the different actions in which every well destroys hundreds of thousands of liters of water. It generates more greenhouse gases. There's a lot of consequences in terms of nature, life, health, but everything moves forward with the governmental plan. These will multiply themselves. It will probably leave little money in the country. And then the other called YPF, which is the biggest company that operates in Argentina, in any way you want to see it, is giving up a lot of areas. So they wanted 55 areas of exploitation, and they gave it to licitations of small companies. And other companies that haven't been able to face, and other companies that have to deal with environmental liabilities that are interesting in the economic dimension, but they won't be able to confront all the damages of decades of exploitation of YPF. So they're getting rid of that problem. We were making a small note, and there's a company that's going to face real issues in terms of giving up these areas from YPF. And the last point is the repressive policies of which we spoke about previously. So the numbers that reflect the monitor for repression is that they recognize a systematic plan to disarm in a moral way the public protests. So in this 7 months, the report just reaches us since a couple of weeks ago. There are 115% people who have been detained, 115 people. 142 people are facing criminal claims, and there are 2 people who have been detained the day that the senators approved the ley bases. So this outlook of repression is accompanied by attacks on social organizations of different social sectors, social movements. They were speaking about rights of nature, climate change. They were speaking about originary peoples, and the president also pointed out in his speech about the environmental group that there's a group, this group has to be discussed because they don't contribute to development. And also there has been persecution of protesters, and it has implied 50 detentions, and they were just asking certain issues. Patricia Ulrich, we call it funnily enough the Ulrich Protocol that tries to restrict and criminalize. It doesn't try. It criminalizes social protest. And there's a defense project that is also being debated that allow the armed forces to participate in internal security and also intelligence and part of the state. That there was an entity that was replaced. They just changed the name, and now it's SIDA again, and they have millions of dollars in funding and very little control of what this fund will do. And they also talk about genocides, who are in jail for different aberrations to life. And just before I finish closing up, the provinces are completely aligned to this oppressive, violent discourse and also this repression phase, as well as assumption that these huge entrepreneurships, exporters of minerals and energy will bring well-being and development. This phase, it has a coherence, so a repressive government goes hand in hand with wanting to advance in terms of extractivism, in terms of violence, and with popular sectors, and the defenders of nature who are part of this group or these sectors that are seen as a threat. And we are so worried about what can happen in a few months. But to close up, we wanted to leave at this position the report that we were speaking about, the repression monitor that does a characterization of what has been happening these past few months, and also anticipate that we would like to show you a report that deals about dumps, and we wish that we can present to you this information before the verdict. And I thank you so much, and I am available, and I hope this hearing is fruitful and the work that you have ahead so we can make this situation a little bit more fair and just. Thank you for all you have exposed and all the commitment you have given us while we were in the mission and after that. So I want to give the word to, we're going to go to the second block, which is the update of Vaca Muerta, the case of Vaca Muerta, focusing on the province of Rio Negro. And I want to give the word to Fabrizio Di Giacomo and Aileen Tapia, who's part of the multi-sectorial Gulf of San Matias. And I wanted to make a point in terms of having the right to protest. And I think a month a, a month and a half ago, the Human Rights Council approved a resolution that recognizes the approval of as a fundamental human right, the right to protests and international organizations, and it's a fundamental principle to be able to protest. So I think this is a new element that I find very interesting that we have to take into account in the work that we do. So Fabricio Di Giacomo and Aileen Tapia, you can go ahead. You can contribute with your own words. Thank you so much. My name is Aileen Tapia. I am part of the Apuche. I was born and raised 60 kilometers of a small little town called General Conesa, and it's on the shores of Rio Negro. And as Lautaro was commenting, my peoples was born as a fort, as a concentration camp, practically where they used to murder our people. It's an area very charged with history and resistance. And these were the ones who showed up in a map in this project of Vaca Muerta. That is a project Vaca Muerta Sur or South. So the, delving deeper on what El Amon from Neuquén was telling us, this project, since it has the direction of Vaca Muerta Sur, which implies the construction of a pipeline, then the trajectory changed. So it's not going to go through the river at where our territory is, but it will go upstream. And it changes the distance of 600 kilometers, and it goes to a oil port that is one of the biggest ones that we can ever imagine. This has a scope of different territories, as our colleagues were telling us. The type of extraction that is being done in the valley is extraction that is done by fracking, which is a non-conventional method that implies the using thousands of liters of water, as our colleague was explaining in a very clear way. That implies also quakes that are induced. It changes the structure of the productive and energetic matrix in those years. And now it has whomever is a producer in a very critical situation. Rio Negro historically has had a fruit-based economy. There's a banana plantations, and we've seen how these projects have been affecting our territory. And also wanting to point out that there's an advancement in the territory and how we have been left out of any democratic participation, such as hearings, the participation spaces of legislative issues, and also the organizations of articulation, like the Parlamento Mapuche de Huelche de Rio Negro, and also the regulation mechanisms that the community have. And at no point we were allowed to be part of these discussions. And the uh, free consultation point, this consultation is reduced to a situation where if the pipeline doesn't pass through your territory, you can't do anything. You can't appeal, you can't complain, you can't be consulted, or you don't have any right to be consulted. So whenever I was saying that this project goes from the mountain range to the ocean, it goes through Neufuche territory, through the territory of Humedales Ribereños, different ancestral territories of Mapuche situation, and also territories that are completely forgotten by the state. These territories were less than 60 years ago. There was a completely beautiful river when my family always drank the water from the river. And the last time my parents did that, they ended up in the hospital. Where 60 years ago there was a plant that even though the electric towers take energy to Buenos Aires, we don't have any power, we don't have water. And right now we are being left without water. If we don't, if we wouldn't have these wells that we have, we wouldn't have access to water in the different territorial spaces. This crude reality of whomever's on the river shores. And we have seen throughout the years how the it has changed, it has deteriorated, and it started losing strength, and also how we were never allowed to partaking in these decisions, knowing that whomever is downstream, we are the ones who receive all the dump dumping of what people upriver do, all the garbage, and also the territory that is affected is Huiliche and others that imply the Gulf of San Matias, not only the province of Rio Negro, but also the province of Chubut. And they have been denied the possibility of participating of the hearing of Serra Grande, where we're going to approach this issue. And the Gulf of San Matias, other than there being one of the few gulfs that haven't been polluted, they are sacred territory where we have ancestral remains and where there isn't any free previous consultation of how these are established. So they have cut any communication channels of uh, democratic participation, and at the same time, it goes along with we have named in various opportunities in these last months with the announcement of Ulrich, with the Security National Command, but also that has been accompanied by syndicates with repressions, by different right-wing groups or different syndicates that guarantee that we are not able to go into the audiences or the hearings, and whomever manages the press, like Sierra Grande, where the press that are managed by the powerful were the ones who establish the discourse, and at the same time accompanied by persecution. Not persecution specifically with causes that have to deal with the struggle and the defense of the Vaca Muerta Sur project. But yes, in a situation that has been happening for the last years, we have federal causes since more than 8 years ago that limit our level of action to be able to defend the territory and also put in risk our colleagues and our friends, even with death. Each one of these causes that was invented that demonstrate racism that is managed by the state because we're just names on a list, but they don't want to see, and they have no way of proving that we are doing any sort of wrong deed. And this diminishes us morally. So you know that if you have to travel, you have to ask for permission and let your the federal laws know that you're going to be part of the protest and putting in risk the lives of our friends, our colleagues, not having the freedom to act. These are the disciplinary actions that they use to oppress, and we are being persecuted. But now I'm going to give the word to my colleague of the multi-sectorial for the defense of Gulf of San Matias, and just to round up the situation, this persecution that we have been living with during the last years in the territories. I don't want to say that we are not environmental activists. We are territorial defenders. We are indigenous people. We are workers. And many times our dead are not being analyzed in the official numbers of the persecution of earth defenders. And I wanted to remember that Rafael Nahuel was assassinated and he was shot in the back in the territorial resistance defending the ceremonial space. And also Elias Garay, who was assassinated by hitmen of a forestry company. And also remember that our dead are never analyzed from the perspective of activism because activism is too small for the great struggles and the great fights that our people are involved in. So I just wanted to remember that and saying that we will keep on fighting, that extractivism only brings poverty and inequality. And that Mapuches are part of this land and we're going to defend it. Thank you. Thank you, Aileen. I think you also um want to continue with what you wanted to say, Fabricio. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the invitation, for letting us tell our story in Rio Negro. Particularly, we wanted to talk about the Law 3308. That was a law that was established in 1999 in the legislature, but had 4 years of history in the popular fights, the resistance struggles of these communities that we are still inhabiting these coastal territories. And at that moment, I was just a kid. And we used to go with my neighbors, with my mom, my dad to say no, because there was a project that was involved there. And after 4 years of struggle with a popular organization and different sectors that were participating, we were achieved a law with a one article that prohibited any exploitation of oil and the construction of pipelines that leave discharge. So during more than 20 years, it gave us the joy of being able to enjoy this maritime area without oil pollution. And this was a benefit and a right that we had for forever. And we used to see how the territories would advance with this matrix. And we used to say, we're so lucky. And a group of legislators modified the law in an unconstitutional way, not only not abiding by the Escazú agreement and other agreements, but also doing this in a completely immoral way, very unethically. We found out that this project was approved a few days before, looking for authors to sign it because none of the authors was a legislator. So we mobilized and organized ourselves so that we could approve this, we could stop this unconstitutional action. And also there was a group of people who were workers. We don't have anything against workers, but they were violent. They wanted to destabilize the popular protest. And there was this whole plan that wasn't so hidden, but very powerful, that had a lot of money, a lot of economic power because it bent many wills in the political, executive, legislative, judicial aspects. And we were in touch with different environmentalists that allowed us to present an appeal because of inconstitutional, and this was brutally responded to in a very rude manner, saying that we didn't have any consequence, we didn't have any legitimacy, that the year that we are speaking about is very hypothetical. But all of this gave us more tools to be able to understand that we were fighting for something bigger, and we keep modeling ourselves with the coastal networks that are united through different organizations, NGOs, assemblies, with the plurinational campaign of RIGI. This is a completely anti-democratic effort that comes to consolidate what it has been happening already. And as Aileen was letting us know, this is not new, but now it is legitimized, and many more provinces adhere themselves to this, even though there's popular resistance. But we keep understanding that we have to keep organizing ourselves in the horizontal manner, in the cooperative manner. And this for us is very important because these are always needed. So we always say we have certain flaws in the communication area, that we are always fighting this huge monster that imposes a narrative that is hegemonic, and that it tramples our small testimonies, our small attempts for communication. They minimize us, but we never want to leave this communication aspect uncovered. So now as we are conforming other associations, trying to articulate ourselves from a legal point of view. So we can keep presenting actions, and we are also supporting the initiatives that there are. Also, there's a province, uh, in this province, we are also fighting against the exploitation of water that guarantees life of all communities with all this force that or strength that is given by economic powers. We feel that we are unprotected in the territories. Each time we are more worried about the situation, and this intimidates us a lot. Nobody wants to give up on this struggle, none who are participating. We're thinking about saying we're going to do this or we're not going to do that because we are very fearful, and we need other stances that help us legitimize these popular struggles that for us are the solution and the road to follow with collective horizontal solidarity driven initiatives to find other ways to relate ourselves, to consume, to produce, that is born from and for the communities. That's what I wanted to tell you. So we are open to any question or comment you might have in terms of the regional situation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Fabricio and Nailen, for your presentations. This is very worrisome about the anything that is around the construction of the pipeline. Before giving the word to the judges, so they can make their questions or their comments, or to go deeper in some issues, we want to remind you that we are open for the reception of documents, to have more literature of whatever you've been able to share in this here, so we can study all the different sources of information that you've had to prepare the verdict. And also the topic that Fabricio was letting us know was a situation of threat and hostile behaviors to the defenders of the territory. So for us, it's important to have a general perspective of what is going on in that sense. We have almost 20 minutes, so the judges can make their questions or comments and take advantage of this space for articulation. I see Alberto that is raising his hand. So we're gonna give the word to Alberto, as he also was the president of the tribunal. So thank you so much, Alberto, for your intervention, and also Kike will speak. Hello, good afternoon, good evening to all the people who are participating in this session of the tribunal. And I celebrate the expositions and the presentations that we've heard. They allow us to update the information, and they can reach a very worrisome conclusion that could synthesize itself in one word, which is how serious the situation is getting of the hydrocarbons in Vaca Muerta, with the perspective to amplify itself to other provinces in the construction of the infrastructure that will go through Rio Negro and Chubut, and that it would only be a situation related to Neuquén, but we would have to approach it in a vast spectrum about all the implications that there are with the construction of the maritime infrastructure for the export of hydrocarbons. If I've understood this well, there is a first point that we have to take into consideration, which is considering the need to consider this amplification of the territory and the issues and the struggles, and recognizing the different processes that exist for our final verdict. And the second point has to deal with a question, just for information. Whenever we were in Vaca Muerta in Neuquén, we were commented that there was a process that was being put forth of a legalization land process for the Mapuche peoples, and I would like to know what are the advancements and if it already happened, and if it happened, we want to know what context there is in terms of the legality of the land, and if it hasn't happened, what is the situation? Because with this land legalization, does the Mapuche, um, do the Mapuche peoples have a better chance at defending themselves? And then another important point is the need. Whenever you are letting us know about situations such as the sentence of this Comarsa company in terms of the oil dumps, to give us a little bit more information for whomever is not really aware of Argentinian reality of these decisions that have to deal with these state affairs or the province of Neuquén. I think it's fantastic that we've been able to advance in the terms of this Comarsa company. And I remember with a huge impression what was happening with the city center of Neuquén. And I want to know the amplification or the trans or these being moved to other areas. Is this corruption situation still worrisome? So I really want to know about what is happening in this reality, and what Fernando is saying. I point this out is the fact that, in my way of seeing, we have to handle with a lot of care and a lot of attention that in Argentina there's a new government, and from outside we see and are very worried about the deterioration of the rights of communities, the deterioration of rights, human rights, and the deterioration of Argentinian economies, and that Argentina would be in a poverty situation, and the pressures for extractivism is growing. The narrative of extractivism has a new force because it's presented as a new alternative with the extraction of natural resources, and in this case, hydrocarbons. Sorry. So in this context, I think that tribunal should be clear for the verdict to be able to identify all of the elements that configure scenarios that more worrisome every time for environmental rights, for the citizenship, and also the affectation of the rights of nature or rights of Mother Earth. So I take the words of Aileen Tapia when she says that it's not only about environmental activists, but defenders of the territory. I think that's a way, very good way to put it conceptually, to know what we are facing in these realities. And I just would like these clarifications. So I've shared my ideas to keep working so that we can have as soon as possible at the beginning of November and to be present in Neuquén. And I think that we are also visit Rio Negro and Chubut. Thank you, Alberto. I suggest that Enrique and Yuvelis can ask the question, and whomever wants to answer can do so, and choose what question they'd like to answer so that we have everything all together. Enrique, I'm gonna give the word to you, Belis. I think many men have spoken, so go ahead, you, Belis. Thank you, Enrique. I am here without kids, but I already have a child here with me. Hello, everyone. For me, it's a pleasure uh, to say hi to you. I resonate a lot with the words, and I think the words of Fabricio whenever he says that he feels fearful. This makes us think a lot about the frailty, not as a weakness, but as a situation that is more diverse, we'll be able to express it, to defend this great territory, and also defending their lives. I'm very worried that there is an increase in violence since our visit, and I get worried because time I say closer to other territories, speaking about Colombia particularly, the fight against fossils or sovereignty is a constant struggle for survival and this dignified life that defenders of nature have. So I think this is a very important thing to consider in our verdict, and also something that we take into regard after a visit, independently of a government and our energies and the energy including ours. Life should be considered in any scenario of the more amplified discussions that we have. I am very worried about, it doesn't worry me, it hurts me. The intervention that Aileen gave, I felt her so much. I send you so much strength. I send you a lot of strength. I think that because we defend life, it shouldn't cost ours, and I'm not speaking in a physical sense, but also emotionally. This whole feeling of being feeling persecuted, that our lives are transformed, that we don't know how to live them because we feel it belongs to other people, even if we feel that we're not free, even though we're fighting for freedom. It's a feeling that I understand and that I hate every day of my life, but sadly, it's very present in our reality of being nature caretakers. So that for the people who presented you for your courage, and I feel that we will do anything and everything in our power to be able to help you and to help in this sense that we will visit you. I'd love to hear you and be with you in your territory. This is something that we fight for in Colombia. We don't want this to be sacrificed territories. We want these to be sanctuaries of beauty because life has to be defended in this ample discussion of energy as in everything without speaking about territories in nature. So I send you a huge hug, and my sister Violet also sends you a huge hug. She was listening to your interventions. She was very attentive. Thank you, Yuvelis, for your words of solidarity that are so needed. Enrique, you wanted to say yes. Thank you, Yuvelis, for your intervention. Yuvelis is, even though she's so young, she's a great defender. We admire her and we love her very much. And I met her in her exile. I met her in another country when she was exiled because she was persecuted as an environmental defender. She has a very long trajectory, even though she's very young. We'll share some stories while sharing some mates. I just wanted to tell you because I feel it's important for you guys to know two things. I want to make concrete questions so that I can give the word to friends or colleagues to whom I thank very much for your interpretation, for your intervention. And thing is that the scenario was different 1 year ago when we visited Vaca Muerta. It was very complex. It was a extractivist consensus, and I think there's 180 degrees of movement in terms of what Lev and Aileen has told us. I want to ask about the defamation campaigns. We need material in regards to this. I hope that you can materialize it because I think this has to be part, this whole anti-indigenous, anti-Mapuche campaign that is happening that is resonating so much. We were talking about energetic transitions, 21st century. Now we're going back to the 19th century, and the key um, situation of RIGI that generates a consequence on the extractivist export model, and then talk about this because a combo between RIGI and the creation of this productive security unit is a combination that only guarantees social conflict and criminalization and repression. So I wanted to ask you, how has the situation worsened till today, the situation? And the other very concrete question, and I'll be done, is for Fabricio. Please give us in detail, but also tell us what are the exact threatened areas that wants to be installed with the building the port. What places, what beauties do you have? What of nature is being threatened? And this will be like a eternal debate. I think those are very specific questions, and I think you have um space to delve deeper. And so I will give the space to our presenters and also having the freedom to answer the questions. We have 10 more minutes, so we will have a bit more time to compile all the information. Bruno, please go ahead. Briefly, just to answer what was being asked by Alberto Acosta, is that the whenever you saw the dump site, physically it's the same. What happened in this interim? So the company had been revoked their environmental license, and they shouldn't have been doing what they were doing. And without prejudice, they s- they are machines that are operating in the place. So this doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing the same things or the same tasks, because I found out that there's an intention of being able to fix the disaster that they generated. And there's machinery and some operations that are taking place in this place. And then whenever these precautionary measures were um, being presented, they asked to not generate this embargo for the company so that they wouldn't um, affect the workers of the company. So they keep working, but physically it's still in the same place. There's the same amount of dump, and they don't have the logistics to be able to transport waste from that area because it's a very difficult task. So this is in the physical space. I don't know if I was clear in this sense. Yes, absolutely clear. And what is going on in Nanielo? Are they still doing the same practices? I understand that the city of Neuquén, nothing has been remediated and everything is being translated to Anielo. So supposedly they had taken an oven because they had thermal ovens that they were using to fix the area. There's one that was embargoed, and then the other one was transported to Anielo. And I understand that they have the environmental license, and then how the plant is performing in Anielo. In terms of what you were asking me, in terms of the provincial or federal jurisdiction, Argentina, many of you know, but I want to reiterate something. I'm sorry if I'm reiterating. This is one of the provinces that has um its autonomy. So there's a series of things that pertain to the province exclusively. So this is for provincial effects. The decision is provincial without prejudice that in terms of litigation, we invoke decisions of a superior tribunal for uh, dealings of other provinces. What do I mean? For example, there's a province that could invoke the antecedent of Neuquén. There's something that we use as a source for the decisions of the higher tribunals or courts. But the effect of the sentence and the importance that it has for the tribunals is provincial, not federal. It's another specter of justice. Thank you, Bruno. Lev or Fabrizio wanted to add, to maybe answer a couple of questions, and then we're gonna close our call because time is pressing. I wanted to answer the question you had asked about the territories in my exposition. As I said before, in terms of territorial organization was suspended. And this was something that was happening. There was a reparation section, and in Neuquén, it was used only for 5 days, for 5 years, sorry. This was being developed until last year, and it was suspended. And there are areas that are so important that were part of the land order. And this is important because it leaves us with the recognition of the indigenous stance in terms of property titles that have been selling with land with people in it. And this is typical in the whole country and all of America. And I think I was also forgetting the Fernando of Lobsar, that this can generate a situation of impunity in Comarsa, in Darsa, in Trite, in the oil grounds, because this situation, the government is offering an apology so that another company grabs that because they want to have judicial safety in spite of the pollution or contamination. This is whitewashing, and for us, it's called contamination. Now, I wanted to point out also that the plants are overflowing, the same in Neuquén, and they were talking about these regulations, but they haven't advanced. And I also think it's important to mention that uranium mining started to happen, and this is very unknown to us, as well as what fracking, we found out the right for protest, it's still criminalized. And the federal government having accused of terrorists from a company as being criminal, and also imposing terror against the Mapuche peoples and and depriving us from our sacred festivities and from the most crude insults that we have heard from senators, and they treat us as dirty indigenous people who are terrorists, and we don't have the right to claim anything because they say that we're another country, negating the existence of the Mapuche peoples, and there's a permanent political violence and racism and hatred from politicians in the different provinces. So this is a little bit to paint the picture, and we can close the hearing with you. with Fabricio. I wanted to add key points that have to deal with the modification of land laws that have a change in terms of how the territorial dealings were made. Because on one hand, the law was modified from one day to the next, and the other government of Arabella Carreras that has the same political still governor. So they modified the land property titles, and this was done behind closed doors, which led to territorial matters that are not being done for land secretariats, but are done through CODESI. In parallel, there has been a displacement of CODESI, so there's a extends territory from the mountain range to the ocean. You have to have reordering and articulated with each of the 180 communities. And this would have to deal with definancing the actions, the organism in itself. So I wanted to, in terms of how our symbols are being demonized, how we are being denied our practices. Many of the causes that we had were stopped, federal causes were stopped for an agreement that was done with the ex-president Alberto Fernandez. And with this agreement didn't work, which was recognizing our different practices, seeing that this area, this territory was from the Machi. So if you can recognize that this territory is yours, you can't usurp it. And then the causes came into force again, into the reality that was being seen last year. So I'll give the word to Fabricio. Thank you, Aileen. I wanted to comment what Kike had asked. The Gulf of San Matias is an area that has a lot of biodiversity. It's a very sensitive ecosystem wise, and the north of the Gulf, as you know, it's like a sea, and the southern area is another peninsula, but we are part of the same maritime ecosystem. There's many protected areas that are reserves, and the peninsula that was declared uh, World Heritage by UNESCO. If we see where the oil post is, you can see that it is surrounded by all of these protected areas that are World Heritage sites. So there's a whale that travels around the Gulf, and it goes through what would be the oil port. So we've heard governors, different lieutenants say that it will interfere with the routes of the whales, but there are studies that prove this, like the study for the conservation of whales, and they have lined out the route. You can see how these huge boats transport oil and would go through this route. And a few steps from the oil port, and there's a reproduction of fish, which is also a huge source of work. And they are also in danger with these mega projects. And this is a great threat for the area. Just a brief comment that I heard right now, and I hadn't noticed, but in these changes at the state level, what happened in the province, that the environmental areas start to depend on energy, and this was systematic in Neuquén, Rio Negro, and Mendoza. We don't know that it's a casualty or that it's casual, it's a coincidence, but it talks about how they're thinking about the environment and how the governments are thinking about environment. So since December, environment depends on the Ministry of Energy. Thank you, Fer. Just one comment. I think Claudia's not with us right now, but she wrote a message on the chat. I'm gonna read it because it says something that we can. I want to thank all of you from our visit. From the socio-environmental landscape has changed, territorially has worsened, but we have to look into the future because we haven't seen anything yet, and there's setbacks by this government, and care and fear are our reality, as you have mentioned. And this is something we have to consider in terms of our visit, while we get closer to our visit and our visit. And I think we're wrapping up. So I thank you very much to all of you. First thing, before taking a picture of the hearing, I would like to ask if we have any judge that would like to make a final comment for closing up of what we have listened to, these very strong testimonies. I don't know if one of our judges wants to have a final intervention before closing the call. No? Pati, somebody else? No? So if it's a case, maybe please open your camera so we can have a final picture, and ask all the people who have presented today if you have a good connection that you can open your camera so we can have a picture of this hearing, with this follow-up hearing that we've had today, that will help us strongly to complete the verdict that is on its way. And I want to remind you the date of the visit will be from the 4th to the 10th of November. So we will visit the territory again to be able to launch the verdict. So I'm going to take another picture so that you can show us your best angles. Perfect. We have a picture of this hearing. And without further ado, we would like to thank everyone for this follow-up hearing. I want to remind you that the Secretariat is open, in the sense that if there are videos, testimonies, documents, reports, any information that you might consider and that you wish to include within the final verdict, you can um, send it to us so that it can be revised by the judges of the tribunal. So without further ado, thank you so much. Goodbye. Big hugs.